I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. I had to read the headline twice, because what I saw didn't just sound unusual. It sounded impossible. America just got rejected, not by an enemy, not by a rival power, but by its own allies, and not quietly either. This wasn't some behind-the-scenes disagreement. This was public, direct, and blunt, in real time, while the world is already on edge. Key US allies just refused a major military request. I remember staring at my screen thinking, wait, did that really just happen? Because this isn't normal. We're talking about a moment where global tensions are already boiling, where critical oil routes are under threat, where one wrong move could send shockwaves through the entire world economy. And in that exact moment, America asked for backup, and the answer came back, no, not maybe, not let's discuss, not we'll consider it, just no. And that's when it hit me. This isn't just a rejected request. This might be the moment we look back on and say, that's when everything started to change. Because when allies stop standing together, what comes next is something far more unpredictable. And trust me, what led to this moment? It's even more shocking than the rejection itself. So I started digging deeper, because something didn't add up. Why would allies, countries that have stood side by side with the US for decades, suddenly refuse? And then I realized this wasn't just about sending ships. This was about where those ships were going. The Strait of Hormuz. Now, if you don't know why that matters, let me put it simply. This narrow stretch of water carries a massive chunk of the world's oil supply. We're talking about the kind of place where if something goes wrong, gas prices spike, economies shake, and global markets panic. And right now, that's exactly what's at risk. Tensions in the region have been rising fast. Threats, warnings, military movements, it's all been building, like a pressure cooker. And then came the request. The US wanted allies to send naval forces to help secure the area. On paper, that sounds reasonable. Protect trade, stabilize the region, prevent escalation. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized this wasn't just a defensive move. This was tied to a much bigger conflict, one that not everyone agreed with. And suddenly, the rejection started to make more sense. But here's the part that really got me. This didn't happen out of nowhere. There were warning signs, signals, moments where things could have gone differently, and almost no one is talking about them. Look, I'm just going to say it the way I see it. This situation didn't explode overnight. It built up, decision by decision, move by move, and if you've been paying attention, you've probably noticed a pattern, a more aggressive tone, faster decisions, less consultation, almost like the strategy shifted from let's move together, to we'll move first, others can follow. Now sometimes that works. Strong leadership can push things forward. But other times, it creates distance. Because here's the reality. Allies don't like being surprised. They don't like being pulled into situations they didn't help shape. And as I kept reading through statements and reactions, I started noticing something subtle but important. This wasn't just disagreement. This felt like frustration that had been building for a while. Like this wasn't the first time allies felt out of the loop. And when the request finally came to send forces into a high-risk zone, it wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about trust, and whether that trust was still there. That's when I realized the world wasn't reacting the way anyone expected. So I flipped the perspective. Instead of asking, why did they refuse? I started asking, why wouldn't they? And suddenly, things looked very different. Because from their point of view, this wasn't their fight. They weren't consulted at the beginning. They didn't shape the strategy. They didn't sign off on the escalation. And now, they're being asked to step into the middle of it. That's a tough sell. Some leaders made it clear. This isn't what NATO is for. It's a defensive alliance, not a blank check for every military operation. Others were more direct. They don't want to risk being pulled into a larger war. And honestly, whether you agree or not, you can understand the logic. Because once you commit forces, you're in. There's no easy exit, and I'll be real with you. This is the moment my perspective shifted. Because what initially looked like betrayal started to look more like self-preservation. But here's where things take a turn. Because once that no went public, this stopped being a quiet disagreement and turned into something much bigger. The reaction was immediate. and intense. Statements started coming out, tensions started rising, and you could feel it, even through a screen. This wasn't just diplomacy anymore. This was pressure, frustration, a sense that something bigger was slipping. Because when allies say no like that publicly, it sends a message, not just to each other, but to the entire world. And that message, unity, isn't guaranteed. I remember thinking, this is the kind of moment rivals watch closely, because cracks in alliances don't stay hidden. They get noticed, analyzed, sometimes even exploited. And internally, it creates a different kind of pressure. Questions start forming. Can the US act alone? Should it? What does this mean moving forward? And that's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about ships in a strait. This was about something much deeper. And just when it felt like things couldn't get more intense, everything flipped. There's always a moment in situations like this where everything suddenly becomes clear. And for me, this was it. This wasn't about one request or one disagreement. This was about a shift in how alliances work, a shift in how power is exercised, a shift in how countries choose when and if they get involved. Because for decades, the assumption was simple. If the US leads, allies follow. But now, that assumption is being tested, and maybe even challenged. And I just sat there thinking, are we watching the rules change in real time? Because if allies start picking and choosing like this, if coordination starts breaking down, if trust starts weakening, then the entire global balance starts to shift. Slowly at first, then all at once. And just when you think that realization is the biggest moment, the real explosion happens somewhere else entirely. Not in war rooms, not in official statements, but online. I opened social media, and it was chaos. Everyone had an opinion. Some people were furious. How can allies refuse at a time like this? Others were just as loud on the opposite side. Why should they get involved in something they didn't start? And then there were the analysts, the commentators, the armchair strategists, breaking it down from every possible angle. You had hashtags trending, clips going viral, debates exploding in real time. And what stood out to me wasn't just the division, it was how personal it felt. People weren't just talking about policy, they were talking about identity, about leadership, about trust, about what alliances are supposed to mean. And I caught myself scrolling, thinking, this isn't just a news story anymore, this is a global conversation. Because moments like this, they don't stay contained, they ripple, they spread, they shape how people see the world and their place in it. And buried underneath all that noise was a truth that not everyone was ready to face. Here's the truth. Power isn't just about strength, it's about alignment, about trust, about shared purpose. And when those things start to crack, even the strongest alliances can feel fragile. What we're witnessing right now, in my opinion, isn't just a disagreement, it's a reality check. For everyone. Because no country, no matter how powerful, operates in a vacuum. And no alliance survives without communication, respect, and coordination. But here's the part that actually gives me hope. Moments like this force reflection, they force recalibration. They force leaders and people to ask harder questions about what matters, about what comes next, about how to move forward in a world that's clearly changing. And maybe, just maybe, that's how something stronger gets built. Not from blind agreement, but from honest, sometimes uncomfortable truth. So here we are, a single moment, a single decision, but consequences that could stretch far beyond what we see right now. And the real question isn't just what just happened, it's what happens next. Are we looking at a temporary disagreement, or the beginning of something bigger? A shift in alliances, a change in global dynamics, a new way countries interact on the world stage? I want to hear what you think. Do you see this as a turning point, or just another political moment that'll pass? Drop your thoughts below. I read more of your comments than you think. And if you want more breakdowns like this, not just headlines, but the deeper story behind them, make sure you subscribe, because in times like this, understanding what's really happening, that's more important than ever. And trust me, this story, it's far from over.